On a frozen highway just after dawn, four little girls moved slowly along the shoulder of the road, huddled together and trembling, each one holding on to the next, as if that small chain were the only thing keeping them upright. Until a lonely millionaire spotted them from his SUV. At first, he kept driving, until one small detail in the rearview made him hit the brakes. And what happened next left you speechless. I'd love to know where you're joining us from today. It reminds me that no matter the distance, we are all connected by heart. Thank you for being here now. Sit back and let this story speak to you. Winter did not arrive gently that year. It settled in like a weight, pressing the color out of the world and leaving everything washed in pale gray. Along Northbridge Spur Highway, the shoulder was lined with dirty ridges of snow plowed weeks ago, then forgotten. The sky hung low and dull, and the air carried that quiet, early morning stillness where even sound seemed reluctant to travel. Traffic was light. Most people were still inside their houses, hands wrapped around coffee mugs, engines warming in driveways, lives safely enclosed. Ethan Carver drove alone. At 44, he was used to mornings that began before the rest of the world stirred. His dark SUV cut steadily through the cold, tires humming softly against the asphalt. The Bluetooth was off. No calls, no dashboards glowing with data. Just the road, the muted light, and the rare luxury of silence. Ethan lived a life of order meetings stacked precisely, logistics charts that told him where everything belonged, systems that ran because nothing was left to chance. He liked mornings like this because they reminded him that, at least sometimes, the world could feel controlled. Then something appeared ahead that didn't fit. At first, his mind rejected it outright. Four small shapes, barely more than shadows against the snow, moving in a single line along the narrow shoulder of the highway. Too small, too slow. His eyes flicked to the road sign ahead, then back again. This wasn't a bus stop. There were no houses, no neighborhood roads branching off. Just open highway and industrial land stretching out in both directions. His grip tightened on the steering wheel. As he drew closer, the shapes sharpened into people. Children, four of them, all the same height, all wearing coats far too thin for the cold. Each carried something, a backpack, a small bag, a bundle clutched close to the chest. They walked carefully, eyes fixed on the white line at the edge of the road, as if following an invisible guide that only they could see. Ethan slowed without realizing it. The details came into focus one by one. One girl's sneakers were soaked through, darkened by slush. Another's sock slipped halfway down her heel with every step. Their coats didn't match. Different colors, different sizes, all worn at the seams. The smallest girl walked at the back, dragging a gray stuffed rabbit by one ear. The toy bounced dangerously close to the road each time a truck roared past, wind kicking up spray of icy grit. Ethan's chest tightened. He had seen a lot on this stretch of highway over the years: protesters, breakdowns, the aftermath of accidents that left twisted metal and blinking hazard lights. He had never seen four little girls walking alone like this, not together, not in winter, not with that strange, quiet determination in the way they moved. Something was wrong. A memory rose uninvited, sharp and sudden. A much younger Ethan, standing on the side of a rural road with everything he owned stuffed into a black trash bag, waiting, watching cars pass, telling himself that someone would stop eventually. That memory had edges he usually kept buried beneath decades of success and distance, but now it pressed up hard against his ribs. He swallowed. The instinct that had guided him for years, the one that said, "Don't get involved, keep moving, someone else will handle it," fought for control. That instinct had served him well in boardrooms and negotiations. Out here, on an empty highway, it felt thin, inadequate. "You can't just drive past this," he muttered, the words barely audible in the quiet cabin. Before his mind could argue back, his hand reached for the controls. Hazard lights flashed amber against the gray morning. He eased the SUV onto the shoulder ahead of the girls, careful to give them space, heart beginning to pound harder with every second. He checked his mirrors. Another truck passed, then a lull. Ethan took a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. This was the moment where most people hesitated, where they told themselves they were late or unqualified, or that getting involved only made things worse. Ethan felt all of that flicker through him, and then felt something heavier settle on top of it. Responsibility. The kind that didn't come with a title or a contract, but still demanded an answer. He opened the door. Cold air rushed in, biting at his face, cutting through the warmth of the car. The sound of the highway grew louder, harsher. He stepped out onto the shoulder, boots crunching softly against the frozen gravel. The girls noticed him then. All four heads lifted at once. They stopped. For a brief moment, no one moved. Four identical faces stared at him, wide-eyed, guarded, too old in the way they watched him. The smallest girl tightened her grip on the stuffed rabbit. The one in front straightened her shoulders, as if preparing herself for something unpleasant but inevitable. Ethan raised his hands slightly, palms open, making himself look less like a threat. He took a step away from the SUV, careful not to crowd them. "Hey!" he called out, keeping his voice low and steady despite the rush of traffic behind him. "Hey there!" The wind carried his words toward them. They didn't answer. They just watched. Standing there on the side of a nearly empty highway, Ethan realized how thin the line was between the world he knew and the one these girls were walking through. A line of asphalt, a few feet of snow. One decision to stop or not. And he knew, with a certainty that surprised him, that whatever happened next would change more than just this morning. He took another step forward, choosing fully now to leave the safe, sealed world of his car behind. The wind cut sharper once Ethan stepped fully away from the SUV. It threaded through his coat, carried the smell of cold metal and old snow, and pressed urgency into every second. The highway behind him sighed and roared in uneven bursts as cars passed, each one a reminder of how exposed this narrow strip of shoulder really was. He stopped a few feet from the girls, close enough to speak, far enough not to crowd them. "Hey!" he said again, softer this time, letting the word settle. "You girls okay?" The one in front, clearly the leader, lifted her chin. She was small for 7, but there was a stiffness in her posture that didn't belong to a child. Her coat sleeves swallowed her hands, but her voice came out steady.
"We're fine, sir."
It was too quick, too smooth.
"We're just walking home."
Ethan nodded slowly, as if accepting the answer at face value. He had learned long ago that pushing too hard too fast only made people shut down, especially kids who had practiced their answers. "Walking home," he repeated, glancing around. There was nothing out here that resembled a home, no houses, no side streets, just the long gray ribbon of road, a distant cluster of low warehouses, and a weathered green sign half buried in snow. Pine Hollow Exit, 6 miles. Ethan felt a quiet click in his chest. 6 miles might as well have been 60 for children this small. He looked back at the girls. All 4 were identical, same pale hair, same sharp little noses reddened by the cold, but their expressions told different stories. The leader's eyes stayed locked on his, watchful. The second girl shifted her weight from foot to foot, lips moving as if she might speak. The third stared down at her shoes, studying the slush like it held answers. The smallest one flinched slightly at the word home, fingers twisting the ear of the stuffed rabbit until the fabric creased. "Which way's home?" Ethan asked gently. The second girl jumped in too fast.
Just over there?
She said, pointing, then stopping mid-gesture. Her hand wavered, redirected, pointed somewhere else. She realized what she'd done and yanked her arm back, cheeks flushing.
We walk this way all the time.
She added, talking faster now.
It's not far. We're used to it.
The leader shot her a look. Not angry, protective. Ethan felt it then, the tell. The slight hitch in their breathing, the way the smallest girl's shoulders crept up around her ears. This wasn't a story being told for the first time. It was a shield, a protective lie, built out of fear and repetition. "Okay," Ethan said, keeping his tone neutral. "Do your parents know where you are?" The leader's jaw tightened.
We don't need a ride,
She said before he could finish.
We're not supposed to bother anybody.
A truck blasted past, horn blaring as it shifted lanes. The rush of air sent a spray of icy slush toward them. Instinctively, Ethan stepped closer, angling his body between the girls and the road. The smallest one gasped softly, then pressed herself into the group. Ethan's heart kicked harder. "I'm not worried about bothering," he said. "I'm worried about you freezing or getting hurt. It's not safe out here." For a moment, no one answered. The wind tugged at their coats. Somewhere down the highway, another engine growled closer. The girl who hadn't spoken yet, the quiet one, lifted her eyes briefly. There was something old in that glance, something tired. Then she looked away again.
We're fine.
The leader repeated, but her voice wasn't as steady now.
Really?
Ethan weighed his next words carefully. Too much pressure and they might run. Too little, and he'd be leaving them exactly where he'd found them. "How about this?" he said, lowering his voice as if offering a secret. "You don't have to go anywhere with me. But my car's right there. We can step inside for a few minutes. Just to warm up, doors stay unlocked. You can sit where you like." The second girl, Lucy, he would later learn, swallowed hard. "Just for a minute?" "Just a minute," Ethan said. "No one should be this cold." They looked at one another, a silent conversation passing between them. The smallest girl hugged her bunny tighter. The quiet one nodded almost imperceptibly. Finally, the leader sighed, the sound more like an adult than a child.
Okay,
She said.
but just to warm up.
Ethan didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He simply stepped back, opened the rear door of the SUV, and let warm air spill out into the cold. As the girls climbed in, careful, hesitant, still ready to bolt, Ethan felt the uneasy certainty settle deeper. This wasn't going to end with a few questions and a ride to nowhere. Something underneath their practiced answers was already unraveling. And he wasn't walking away. The doors closed softly, sealing out the wind. Warm air rushed into the SUV, fogging the windows almost instantly. The heater hummed low and steady, and for a moment none of them spoke. The girls stayed pressed together in the back seat, coats still on, backpacks clutched tight on their laps, as if someone might try to take them away. Ethan started the engine and pulled carefully back onto the road, easing the car forward just enough to get them clear of the shoulder. He didn't drive fast. He didn't turn on the radio. He let the quiet do some of the work for him. After a few seconds, the smallest girl, Lane, let out a shaky breath she'd been holding too long. She leaned her head against Lucy's shoulder, still gripping the gray stuffed rabbit, its ear now twisted and flattened from her hand. "You're safe for a minute," Ethan said gently. eyes on the road. "I promise." No one answered, but the tension in the back seat eased just a fraction. He reached into the center console and pulled out a sealed bottle of water, then another. He passed them back one at a time, careful not to make it feel like an interrogation. "Drink if you want," he said. "No rush." Lucy took one immediately, unscrewing the cap with trembling fingers. The quiet girl, Leah, accepted hers with a nod. Lila hesitated, then took it last, still watching Ethan through the rearview mirror like she was measuring him. "So," Ethan said lightly, as if making conversation on any other morning. "Do you all go to the same school?" Lucy answered without thinking. "We used to." The words slipped out and landed hard. She froze, eyes widening. Lila turned sharply toward her, a look flashing across her face that wasn't anger, but fear. Leah's gaze dropped to her lap. Lane pulled the bunny closer, hiding her mouth against its head. Ethan didn't react. He didn't turn around. He didn't ask the follow-up question pressing against his tongue. He simply nodded. "Used to," he repeated. "Okay." They drove on in silence for another minute. The heater clicked as it adjusted. The road stretched ahead, empty and gray. As Ethan reached down to adjust the temperature, one of the backpacks slipped off the seat and thudded softly onto the floor behind him. The sound made all four girls flinch at once. "It's fine," Ethan said quickly. "Just fell over." He glanced back to make sure nothing had spilled. A folded piece of paper had slid halfway out of the bag, its corner crumpled and worn thin from being handled too many times. Ethan hesitated. He had learned over years of negotiations and crisis meetings when not to look. This wasn't one of those times. He reached back, picked up the paper, and unfolded it slowly, careful not to make a show of it. The words hit him immediately. "Notice of eviction, Ridgeview Housing Court Tenant, Mara Lorne, address, Unit 3, D, Birchfield Towers." His eyes scanned the rest without moving his head. "Past due rent. Utilities scheduled for shutoff. Final notice." Then, at the bottom, written in hurried pen, a line that made his throat tighten. "Girls must vacate by Friday. Placement pending. Siblings may be separated." Ethan felt something inside him go very still. He didn't turn around. He didn't say anything. He folded the paper exactly the way it had been, smoothing the crease with his thumb, and slid it back into the backpack as if it had never left. The silence in the car deepened. "Who's Mara?" he asked at last, keeping his voice even. No one answered right away. Lucy stared out the window. Lila's jaw worked like she was grinding something down. Leah glanced at Lane, then back at her hands. Finally, Leah spoke. Her voice was so soft, Ethan almost missed it. "Our aunt," she said. A pause. "For now." Ethan nodded once. "Okay," he said. "Just that. Okay." His mind, meanwhile, was racing. Eviction, court, placement, separation. Words he knew too well. He remembered stamped papers sliding across a desk. A woman with tired eyes saying, "This is the best option available." A hallway that smelled like old carpet and disinfectant. His brother being led away first because he cried less. Best available had never meant best. He glanced in the rearview mirror. 4 identical heads sat in a tight cluster now, like they were bracing for impact. Lane's lower lip trembled, and she pressed her face into the bunny's worn fur, whispering something Ethan couldn't hear. He made a decision. Not yet, not here, not on this road. "I know a warm place nearby," he said, keeping his tone calm, almost casual. "We'll get some breakfast, then I'll help you call your aunt. No tricks, just let's get you off this road first." Lila looked up sharply. You're not taking us to the police? No, Ethan said immediately. Not unless someone's in danger. And right now, the danger was you walking out here. She studied his face through the mirror, searching for cracks. Whatever she saw there made her shoulders loosen slightly. Breakfast? Lucy asked, tentative. Pancakes, Ethan said, and hot chocolate. Lucy's stomach growled loud enough for everyone to hear. She flushed red, then laughed weakly, the sound breaking the tension just a little. Ethan turned the car toward the exit ramp ahead, the green sign for Maple Junction flashing past. Behind him, Lane's lip still trembled, but this time it wasn't just fear, it was hope. And Ethan knew that once hope entered the picture, walking away was no longer an option. He drove on, already aware that breakfast was only the beginning. That eviction notice. It didn't just say, move out. It said, separate them. 4 little girls, 1 stuffed bunny, a single signature away from being torn apart. If you were Ethan, sitting there with that crumpled paper in your hand, would you press them for answers right away? Or would you shield them like he did and wait until they felt safe? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Sometimes what we don't say first is what builds real trust. The Maple Junction Diner sat just off the exit, its neon sign flickering weakly against the gray morning. It wasn't busy yet, only a few trucks in the lot, engines ticking as they cooled. Ethan parked close to the door, the SUV crunching softly over gravel dusted with snow. Inside, warmth wrapped around them immediately. The smell of coffee, butter, and something sweet filled the air. The girls hesitated at the entrance, eyes darting, bodies instinctively pulling closer together. Ethan guided them gently to a corner booth out of the aisle, backs against the wall. Sit wherever you like, he said. They slid in side by side, coats still on, knees touching. Lane tucked the bunny between herself and Lucy, as if making sure it didn't get left behind. Ethan ordered pancakes and hot chocolate without asking. No menus, no questions, just certainty. I'm going to make a quick call, he said, standing. I'll be right over there. Lila watched him carefully as he walked a few steps away, her eyes never leaving his back. Only when he turned his body slightly still, clearly within sight, did she relax enough to wrap her hands around the mug the waitress set down. Ethan pulled his phone from his pocket and turned his back just enough to give them privacy. On the backpacks resting beside the booth, he'd noticed a faded logo stitched into the fabric. Maple Crest Elementary. He dialed the number printed beneath it. The phone rang 3 times. Maple Crest Elementary, a woman answered, her voice tired but kind. This is Ms. Hensley. Ethan swallowed. Hi, my name is Ethan Carver. I'm calling about a set of students, the Lorne girls. There was a pause, then a soft intake of breath. The quadruplets, Ms. Hensley said. Lila, Lucy, Leah, and Lane? Yes, Ethan replied quietly. Oh, thank goodness, she said, relief bleeding into her words. We've been worried sick. Ethan leaned against the counter, eyes flicking toward the booth. The girls sat perfectly still now, hands wrapped around mugs, steam rising in front of their faces. They're bright kids, Ms. Hensley continued, always together, always watching out for one another. You never see one without the other 3. What happened? Ethan asked. Another pause, longer this time. They stopped coming, she said. After their mother passed last spring, their Aunt Mara took them in. At first she was responsive, tried hard. Then things started falling through. Missed meetings, incomplete paperwork. We kept calling. And the building? Ethan asked. Birchfield Towers, Ms. Hensley said quietly. Most of it's empty now. Utilities issues, evictions. We heard rumors the girls might be moved into separate placements if nothing changed. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. "Thank you," he said. "I appreciate you telling me." "Are they safe?" she asked. He looked back at the booth. Lucy was blowing carefully across the surface of her drink. Lane had finally taken off her coat. "Yes," Ethan said, "they are." He hung up and immediately dialed the second number Ms. Hensley had given him. Ridgeview Family Services answered on the fourth ring. "Daniela Price," a woman said, voice brisk but strained. Ethan introduced himself. There was recognition in her tone when he mentioned the girls' names. "They're good kids," Daniela said after a moment. "Too good. They've been holding each other together while everything around them fell apart." She explained what the papers couldn't. Mara had been overwhelmed, working nights, missing deadlines, drinking more than she admitted. 2 missed appointments had pushed the case toward court. "There's a hearing coming up," Daniela said. "If no suitable guardian steps forward, the judge may order immediate placement, whatever's available." "Even if that means separating them," Ethan said. Daniela exhaled slowly. "Yes." Before ending the call, he asked Daniela for Mara's number. She read it out slowly, and he typed it in, staring at the streaked front window while it rang. Voicemail. He tried again. The same hollow recording, the same worn-out voice asking to leave a message after the tone. When he returned to the booth, all 4 girls looked up at once. Lila's spoon froze halfway to her mouth. Ethan slid into the seat across from them. He didn't rush. He didn't soften it too much. "I spoke to your school," he said evenly, "and to Miss Price." 4 sets of eyes widened. "You don't have to pretend anymore." For a heartbeat, no one spoke. The diner noise seemed to fade around them. Then Lucy whispered, "Are we in trouble?" "No," Ethan said. "You were trying to survive." Leah's fingers tightened around her mug. Lane's bunny slipped slightly, and she grabbed it again, fast. Lila stared at him, searching his face the way only children who've learned not to trust easily do. "What happens now?" she asked. Ethan didn't answer right away, because he knew now this wasn't about one morning or one meal. This was about 4 little girls who had walked onto a highway because the world behind them was closing in. And whatever came next, he wasn't going to let it happen quietly. He held their gaze. "That," he said gently, "depends on what we decide to do together." The girls sat frozen, spoons hovering, breath caught waiting to see which kind of adult he would be. And the answer, though not yet spoken, had already begun to form. At first, the diner felt almost safe. The booth was warm. Steam curled up from the mugs of hot chocolate, fogging the air just above the table. The pancakes arrived stacked high, butter already melting into the surface. For a brief, fragile moment, the 4 girls looked like any other kids eating breakfast on a cold morning. But safety, Ethan knew, was often an illusion. People noticed them. Not all at once, not openly at first. Just glances, double takes, eyes that lingered a second too long on muddy shoes, on coats that didn't quite fit, on 4 identical faces sitting too quietly, too tensely. At the next table, a middle-aged woman leaned toward her friend, lowering her voice, but not enough. "Another bunch with no one watching them," she murmured. "Better keep an eye on your purse." Her friend nodded, lips pursed. "Where are their parents?" "Probably waiting for someone else to pay the bill." The words slid across the space like ice. Lila's shoulders stiffened. Her hand tightened around her fork. Lane slowly raised her stuffed bunny, using it to hide half her face. Lucy stared down at her plate, blinking fast. Leah didn't move at all. Ethan was standing a few steps away, pretending to scroll through his phone. He heard every word. When he turned his back to make another call, the tension at the table shifted immediately. A young waitress approached, her smile polite but strained. Are you girls here with that man?" she asked, eyes flicking toward Ethan, then back to the children. Lucy hesitated. He's just helping us." The woman from the next table leaned over, not bothering to hide her disdain. "Helping?" she scoffed. "Don't tell me they're pulling that poor kid act. I read about scams like that all the time." Chairs creaked as people turned. Conversations quieted. The diner's attention narrowed onto the booth like a spotlight. Lila swallowed hard. "We're not doing anything wrong," she said, her voice small but controlled. "We won't cause trouble, I promise." The manager appeared then. Mr. Doyle had a towel slung over his shoulder and the look of someone who believed he was being reasonable. His eyes swept over the girls' worn dresses, scuffed shoes, thin backpacks. "Girls," he said, arms crossing. "Is that man your family?" Lila shook her head. "Well, if he's not, I can't have you sitting here alone. This isn't a daycare." "I can wash dishes," Lila blurted. "I'll clean tables, I swear." A laugh burst from another table. "Did you hear that?" a man said loudly. "Sounds like a movie, all an act." The laughter burned. Lane whispered into her bunny's fur, so softly no one but Lucy heard it. "We're not bad." No one answered her. A well-dressed customer near the counter stood up slightly, gesturing toward the booth. "If no one's responsible for them, call social services," he said. "Letting kids like that wander around just turns into trouble." Trouble. The word shattered what little composure the girls had left. Leah's eyes filled, her face twisting as she tried to hold it in. Lucy's chin trembled, then her breath hitched. "We didn't steal anything," Lucy cried suddenly. "We just wanted one meal. Just one. Like normal people." Her voice broke. Leah covered her face, shoulders shaking. Lane curled into the corner of the booth, trying to fold herself smaller, as if she could disappear entirely. Lila stared at the table, cheeks burning, tears spilling silently onto the wood. The diner fell quiet. Then someone muttered, annoyed, "Great, now they're crying. Who's cleaning this up?" That was when Ethan came back. He stopped just inside the aisle, taking in the scene in a single glance. 4 children breaking down, a manager standing over them, adults watching like spectators. Mr. Doyle turned to him, relief and authority mixing in his tone. "If they're not your family, sir, you'll need to take them somewhere else. We can't keep homeless kids here. You understand the legal side. You look like a man with money." Another customer chimed in, shaking his head. "If it were me, I'd stay out of it. Helping the wrong people gets you in the news these days." The room waited. This was the moment people expected Ethan to step back. To say, "They're not mine," to walk away clean. Instead, he moved forward. He rested one hand on the edge of the booth and spoke calmly, but loud enough for every table to hear. "Someone here just called these girls trouble, didn't they?" No one answered. Ethan reached into his wallet and placed a card on the table. The logo was unmistakable, clean, corporate, powerful. "Write this down clearly," he said. "These girls are with me. I am responsible. And if you're going to throw someone out of this diner, start with me." The air shifted. Mr. Doyle's face drained of color. I was just protecting the restaurant, Mr. Carver." "Protecting a restaurant," Ethan replied evenly, "doesn't mean turning it into a place where 4 7-year-olds cry because adults call them garbage." A few people looked down. One older woman near the window covered her mouth. "You want to call the police?" Ethan continued. Go ahead. I'll explain that I found 4 children walking along a highway on a winter morning, and this diner was about to send them back into the cold. Silence. Ethan knelt in front of the booth, bringing himself level with the girls. You didn't do anything wrong, he said gently. Not by being hungry, not by sitting down. The adults failed here, not you. He stood. We're leaving. This place doesn't deserve you. He placed cash on the table. More than enough. The food's good, he added. The way you treat people needs work. One by one, he took the girls' hands and led them out. Lila's fingers trembled in his grip, but her chin lifted as they passed stunned faces. Outside, the cold hit again. As Ethan opened the car door, Lane tugged softly at his sleeve. Are they going to send someone to take us away now? Ethan looked out toward the highway, jaw tight, eyes distant with memory. If anyone tries to take you, he said slowly, this time they'll have to go through me first. The door closed, and the promise hung in the air, heavy, dangerous, and very real. The drive back into Northbridge Point was quiet, too quiet for a car carrying 4 7-year-olds. No chatter, no shifting, no questions. They sat as if afraid any sound might undo the small safety Ethan had fought for back in the diner. Outside, the sky had darkened into a dull steel gray, the kind that warned of more snow later. Inside the SUV, the heater filled the cabin with warmth, but their silence held a cold of its own. Ethan didn't push them to talk. Not yet. He turned into a gated community, the metal fence sliding open after recognizing his license plate. The girls' heads lifted at once, 4 pairs of eyes sweeping across the clean sidewalks, bright holiday wreaths still hanging on doors, and snow shoveled neatly into low, perfect piles. It was the kind of place where trouble wasn't supposed to cross the gate, where children weren't supposed to walk along highways, where hunger wasn't supposed to exist. As he parked in front of his townhouse, a modern brick and glass place, larger than one man needed, the girls stared up at it with an expression he recognized. Not admiration. Caution. Homes this nice had rules. Homes this nice usually meant adults who didn't want kids making a mess. Come on, Ethan said softly. You're safe here. He opened the door and stepped back so they wouldn't feel trapped. One by one they slipped out, Lane clutching the bunny so tightly its stitching strained. Inside, the house met them with deep quiet. Not silent in a peaceful way, silent in a lonely way. Everything looked untouched, the couch cushions perfectly arranged, the bookshelf immaculate, the kitchen spotless like it had been cleaned long before dawn. There were traces of a life paused mid-breath. A framed photo turned face down on a side table, a closed door at the end of the hall that Ethan didn't look at as he passed. A faint hint of lavender from a room no one slept in anymore. Is this your house? Leah whispered. For now, he said. Come on, let's get you warm. He led them to the guest room. It wasn't designed for kids, but Ethan moved quickly, opening closets, pulling out extra blankets, stacking pillows into 4 makeshift beds close together so their hands could touch from one mattress to the next. He brought out soft pajamas still folded from when his sister visited years ago. Some were too big, some too small, but the girls held them with grateful, tentative fingers. Bathroom's there, he said. Towels are warm in the dryer. Take your time. They nodded timidly, clutching the pajamas to their chests as they shuffled toward the bathroom together, moving as a single unit 4 small shadows, afraid to be separated even for a moment. When the door closed, Ethan exhaled for the first time since the diner. He leaned against the counter in the kitchen, bracing himself with both hands. He could still hear Lane crying softly into her bunny, could still see Lucy's face crumpling under the weight of strangers' judgment, could still feel the anger twisting in his chest at every adult who had looked away before him. He turned on the stove and warmed milk in a pot, stirring cocoa slowly. The sweet smell filled the kitchen, softening the edges of the house's emptiness. By the time the girls returned, hair damp, cheeks pink, wearing pajamas that hung loosely on their small shoulders, 4 mugs of cocoa were waiting on the table. They approached like animals stepping into a clearing, careful, quiet, uncertain whether the peace was real. "It's okay," Ethan said. "Sit." They climbed onto the chairs, pulling their knees up instinctively as if ready to run. Lane set the bunny in her lap and kept one hand on its head. Lila smoothed the sleeve of her too big pajama top. Lucy wrapped both hands around her mug even before drinking. Leah stared at the swirl of cocoa as if afraid to disturb it. Ethan sat across from them, lowering himself until he was level with their eyes. "You don't have to convince me you're okay anymore," he said gently. "Just tell me what you're trying so hard to protect." The words hung there. At first, no one moved. Then Lucy sniffed. Lila looked at her sisters. Leah's chin trembled. Lane pressed her face into the bunny, shoulders shaking in small, controlled tremors. The dam broke, but not with noise, with quiet, halting sentences that overlapped, corrected each other, and finally merged into one truth they'd carried too long. "Our mom died in the spring," Lila said, voice flat with practiced numbness. "She got sick. Then she didn't come home. And Aunt Mara said we could live with her," Leah whispered. "She promised we wouldn't get split up." "She tried," Lucy added quickly, like she needed Ethan to know that part. "She really did, but she worked nights. She was tired all the time. And then the rent, the bills, everything got scary." Lane wiped her nose with her sleeve. "She cried a lot," she said. "Sometimes she forgot to eat." The girls looked at one another, silent in that way children are when sharing a secret they've protected for too long. "When the letters came," Lila continued, "the ones about rent and the court, she stopped opening the door. She thought if she didn't answer, they couldn't take us. Ms. Price told her about placements," Lucy said, "that we might have to go to different homes." Leah's voice cracked. "They said they'd try to keep us together, but they couldn't promise." Lane hugged her bunny tighter, whispering, "They can't make us walk into different houses if we just keep walking together, right?" That line hit Ethan harder than he expected. He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, the girls watched him with an expression he recognized deep in his bones, the look of children waiting to see if their truth would be a burden or a responsibility. "My brother and I," Ethan said quietly, "sat in a hallway once while adults decided where we'd go. They split us up. They said it was best available placement." Lila blinked. "Did it get better?" she asked. Ethan swallowed tightly. "For me, eventually. For him, no. And I still think about that every day." The girls looked down at their mugs. "So your choice," Ethan said softly, "was to stay and be torn apart, or walk until somebody finally listened." Lila nodded, eyes burning. "We picked walking." Ethan leaned back slowly, the weight of their story settling over the table like a second winter. He didn't tell them everything, not yet. Not about the courtroom, not about the system, not about how fragile promises become when filtered through paperwork. What he did say was simple, and it was enough. "You're here now," he said, "and I'm listening." 4 pairs of eyes lifted. For the first time, none of them looked away. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft, steady, quiet. Inside, the house no longer felt empty. It felt like the beginning of something Ethan hadn't felt in a long, long time. A chance to make things right. That choice they made, to walk into winter together rather than be sent to separate homes. It wasn't rebellion. It was love in survival mode. Can you imagine being just 7 years old and choosing the road over being split apart? If you were Lila, would you have walked too? Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear what you would have done. The next morning arrived wrapped in silence. Not the cold kind that haunted Ethan's house before, but a gentler hush, the kind that follows deep sleep and heavy truths finally spoken aloud. He stood in the hallway outside the guest room, listening. Soft breathing, the occasional sleepy shuffle of a blanket, someone, probably Lucy, mumbling in a dream. For the first time since meeting them, they weren't clinging to consciousness out of fear. They were resting. Ethan walked to the kitchen, poured a mug of coffee, and stared out the frosted window as the sun rose over Northbridge Point. The sky was a softer gray today, pale light brushing over the snow-dusted rooftops. He wrapped both hands around the mug and breathed in the steam. What now? That question had circled him all night. Through every tossed pillow, every memory that surfaced of a hallway, a clipboard, a social worker avoiding eye contact as she said, "They'll adapt." He had. His brother hadn't. And Ethan had never forgiven himself for walking into one home while his brother was driven to another. So he waited until the girls woke, until they'd eaten toast and sliced apples, until they sat quietly on the living room rug, playing a silent game with an old deck of cards he'd dug out of a drawer. Then he knelt beside them and said, "I want to tell you something." They looked up instantly. Lila straightened first. Lucy stopped shuffling. Leah folded her hands in her lap. Lane hugged the bunny tighter, eyes wide. Ethan sat cross-legged on the floor across from them. Just a man, not a CEO, not a stranger anymore. "When I was your age," he began, "I had a brother named Simon. We were close, really close. We had this rule where one of us went, the other followed, always." He smiled faintly, then let it fade. "But when our parents lost custody, we got put into the system, and someone decided the best option was to split us. 2 foster homes, 2 counties, 2 different last names eventually." He paused. "My brother never stopped trying to get back to me, but I stayed quiet. I tried to adapt, to survive. I stopped writing back when my letters started coming back unopened. A beat. I built my whole life thinking if I could just be successful enough, rich enough, no one would ever separate people like that again." He looked at the 4 girls, saw their faces shifting, softening, opening. "I'm not helping you because I feel sorry for you," he continued, "and I'm not helping you because you asked." Lila tilted her head, watching him closely. "I'm helping because someone should have helped me, and they didn't. This is me paying a debt I've carried for 35 years. Lucy's voice was small. "But what if someone makes you stop? Or changes their mind?" Leah added. "We're a lot," Lucy whispered. "People say it, all the time." Ethan nodded. "That's fair. I've heard it too. But here's the thing. What you are is 4 human beings who have already survived more than most adults, and helping you isn't a favor." He leaned forward. "Once I stand up in front of that judge, once I say you're under my protection, that's not something I walk back. That's not kindness. It's responsibility." Lila's eyes filled, but she blinked fast, stubborn. "What if our aunt wants us back?" she asked. "Even though she didn't go to the meetings?" "We'll give her a chance," Ethan said. "A real one, but only if she's stable." Only if she can show she's ready to care for all four of you safely. If not, he didn't finish, because he didn't need to. The girls looked at one another. Lucy whispered, "We'd rather sleep on the floor together than in 4 big beds far away." Leah nodded fiercely. Lane murmured, "Together is the only thing that makes it home." Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a pen from his office sleek silver, the kind executives use to sign billion-dollar contracts. He placed it gently on the floor between them. "I'm not a judge," he said, "but here's my offer." He looked them each in the eye. "I'll go to court. I'll stand in front of every agency, every lawyer, and I'll say, 'These 4 girls stay together, and I'll do what it takes to make sure they're safe. But I only do that if you want me to." He gestured toward the pen. "If you agree, you don't need to sign anything. Just each of you touch the pen, one after the other. That's it. That's our deal." Silence fell. Then Lane reached out first. Her tiny fingers grazed the pen like it might disappear if she touched it too hard. Lucy followed, faster, then Leah, solemn. Lila hesitated, then placed her hand atop the others. 4 small hands, 1 heavy promise. Ethan smiled softly, then gathered the pen and stood. "I'll call Daniela. We'll file for emergency kinship protection first, then we'll move fast. It just means I'll ask the court to give me temporary guardianship," he added gently, "so all 4 of you can stay together with me while the adults sort everything out." Lucy tugged his sleeve. "Are we going to live here?" "For now," Ethan said, "but let's take it one step at a time." "Are we allowed to call it home?" Lane asked, voice barely a whisper. Ethan knelt again, met her eyes, and said without hesitation, "Yes." Lane blinked slowly, then nodded. The girls huddled together again, this time not in fear, but in something closer to hope. As Ethan walked toward his study to make the first of 1,000 calls, he glanced back once. 4 sisters sat curled together on the rug. Not clients, not charity cases, not a burden, a family. And this time, no matter what, he wasn't letting anyone tear it apart. It was almost exactly 1 year later. The snow had returned soft and light this time, dusting the rooftops of Northbridge Point like powdered sugar. The world didn't look so gray anymore. It looked quiet, full, settled. Ethan's SUV rolled gently along a side road lined with small houses and bare trees strung with twinkle lights left up from the holidays. The heater hummed. Inside, the sound of 4 very awake, very loud girls filled the cabin. "Lane, your bunny's ear is in my juice cup again." "Only 'cause you moved it. He was sitting still. I told you we should have brought the kits in a box, not that dumb tote bag." "It's not dumb. I made that tote." From the driver's seat, Ethan glanced in the rearview mirror and smiled softly, quietly to himself. 4 girls in matching puffy coats, 4 pairs of boots tapping against the seats. A very tired bunny with a slightly newer stitch across its stomach. A year ago, he wouldn't have believed this was possible. A year ago, they were walking alone down a highway shoulder in the cold, hoping no one would stop them before they could disappear. Now? Now they were on their way to deliver something they'd built with their own hands. "You know," Ethan said over the noise, "I used to like quiet mornings." Lucy grinned. "You don't anymore?" He glanced back. "No," he said, "I like these better." They pulled into the parking lot of the Ridgeview Shelter, where a banner hung across the fence. Family Stays Together Day, sponsored by the Lorne Sisters Initiative. Ethan parked. Inside the shelter, families bustled about, kids chasing each other through the hallways, parents filling out forms, volunteers setting out tables full of supplies. A dozen large cardboard boxes lined the far wall, each labeled with bright purple marker. Stay Together Kits for Siblings in Foster Care. Each kit contained a matching set of stuffed animals, 4 journals bound together with twine, 4 toothbrushes, a blanket, and a hand-drawn card. The front of each card read, "You belong together, no matter what." The back read, "Lila, Lucy, Leah, and Lane." Standing in front of those boxes, the 4 girls beamed like they'd just opened Christmas morning. Lane turned to Ethan. "Do you think kids like us will get to stay together now?" "I think," he said, "you're making it a whole lot more likely." They didn't see it as a big deal. They saw it as normal, as something that should have always existed. To Ethan, it was revolutionary. Later that afternoon, as the crowd cleared and the girls helped stack the last kits into the arms of a social worker, Lane tugged on Ethan's coat. "Can we go for a drive?" she asked. "Just real quick?" "Where to?" She looked at her sisters, then back at him. "You know where." He did. 10 minutes later, they pulled onto a long, lonely stretch of road just outside the city limits, Northbridge Spur Highway. The shoulder had been widened since last year. New signs had gone up. A fence was installed near the spot where 4 small figures had once trudged past the snowbanks, trying not to be seen. They pulled over. The girls got out slowly, their boots crunching on fresh snow. Lila stood with her arms crossed, eyes scanning the road. Leah bent down and traced something invisible into the snow with her finger. Lucy exhaled like she'd been holding her breath since that day. Lane stared down at the shoulder for a long moment, then said quietly, "That's where my bunny almost got hit." They all nodded, quiet, not sad, just remembering. Lila added, "That's where we decided we weren't going to let anyone else choose for us again." Ethan stood beside them, hands in his coat pockets, heart full and aching at the same time. He reached into the glove compartment of the SUV and pulled out a small box. "I've been waiting," he said, "for the right day to give you these." One by one, the girls opened the tiny velvet pouches inside, 4 matching bracelets. Simple, silver, no shine, just one line of engraving tucked neatly on the inside of each band. "We don't split. Not for paperwork," Lane gasped. Lucy clutched hers like it might fly away. Leah turned hers over and over again, then slid it onto her wrist. Lila didn't speak. She just held Ethan's gaze for a long moment, then gave the smallest nod. Back at the townhouse that night, the warmth came not from the fireplace, but from the chaos. Shoes kicked off at the door, jackets half hung on hooks, a half-eaten grilled cheese on the counter, the low hum of a washing machine and someone singing off-key from the hallway bathroom. The house no longer echoed. It laughed. At the kitchen counter, the bracelets sat in a neat little row. 4 of them. A silent promise, polished by time and earned by every choice they'd made since that morning. Ethan stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame, a cup of tea in hand, watching the living room unfold. Lucy was teaching Lane how to braid. Lila sat with a library book open in her lap, pretending not to listen to the conversation. Leah was building something out of magnets that didn't quite stick, and for once, no one looked afraid, not even him. Lane spotted him watching and padded over in sock feet. "Are you staying for dinner again?" she asked. Ethan crouched beside her, resting a hand gently on her shoulder. "I always stay for dinner," he said. "Every time." And she smiled like that was the most normal thing in the world, because now it was. And somewhere out on a quiet stretch of road, 4 footprints from a year ago had finally been covered by snow, not to erase the past, but to mark just how far they'd come. And That's the end of this story. To be honest, I'm still sitting with it. You know, life doesn't always bring us big heroic moments. Sometimes it's just a quiet choice to stop, to notice, to care. Life puts us on lonely roads, but one small act of kindness, it can change someone's direction completely. That's what this story reminded me of, that when we choose to protect each other, even when it's inconvenient or messy, that's when hope finds a way back in. This story may be fiction, but we made it to carry something real: courage, love, second chances. What about you? Did it stir something in you? I'd really love to hear where it landed. Drop a comment, even just a word or two. And if it touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It helps more than you think. There are more stories waiting for you, right here on the screen or in the playlist. Thanks for staying with me today. I'm Flint, sending warmth your way. And a promise, I'll be right here for the next one.